All right, I think I am back to be in live. Let's see if I can hear everything. And redo.
You're watching Tater Thoughts, the no BS take on current events.
All right, now we're back live again. We'll try this again. Hopefully, everything is working just fine. If not, then we're just gonna roll through it. I did want to change the title because it had the title from my last time that I was on. So the big beautiful bill. I don't know why he didn't update the stupid dumbass program. And it looks like it did update. It says live weekly news roundup on YouTube. If you want to comment and go through and interact with the show in any way, feel free. I'll be double checking the comments all throughout the show. And we will definitely have a lot of fun today. So I am. Oh, go ahead and make sure that you like, subscribe, share, especially on my YouTube. Look, the algorithms are against common sense people. If you don't toe the woke line, you YouTube algorithms, everybody, they're just against the conservative point of view, and they're supposed to be changing it. And ever since Trump was elected, but I don't buy it. I think it still kind of suppresses certain sides of the aisle. But what we're gonna do is beat those algorithms by liking and subscribing. If you're watching me on Facebook Live, more than welcome. I won't be checking those comments at all, but make sure that you, if you want to comment and interact live, then we can do that via the YouTube channel. And you can go to youtube.com and look up at Tater Nader, Tater, and Ater, I think is how I spell it. Let me see here. Let me go to my channel here. And what I will also do is grab a link to this thing, copy, and I will put it in the Facebook one time if you want. Let's see. I'm going to put it in the comment section. Let me go to my live real quick. And just bear with me. You know what? Y'all get me 10,000 views a day, and I'll hire an editor and a person to do this for me so that it would be much easier. Yeah, there you go. If you go to at Tater Nader Thoughts, TaterNater Thoughts, and it should be right on my homepage that I am live at the moment, and that will make everything awesome. Let me go ahead and put this in the comments real quick and see if I can share this out. Tater Thoughts and share. And I'm going to share it on my personal page as well. Join me on YouTube to interact via commentary. I'm new at this. It is new, so definitely don't judge if there's not a whole lot of people watching. I don't care. By the time the rewatches come, a lot of times I get tens of thousands of people on the rewatches, so I'm not really that worried about it, although it would be nice to have a live interactive audience. Again, like I said, if you ever want to, there in the comment section, I put the YouTube link. If you want to comment, go live. If you ever want to be on the show and we can discuss these things together, I'm all about that as well. No problems whatsoever with doing a live show, even if you're of the different political persuasion. The only thing I ask is that a lot of liberalism comes from the emotions. This is generalism. Not all smokers get lung cancer, but in general, I noticed that liberals tend to be more emotional, so they get a little more upset sometimes at any sort of criticism, or if you don't agree, then they go to name calling and stuff. And conservatives do it too, or libertarians. But typically, what we want to do is have respectful dialogue. We can agree to disagree. Just because you hold one view, I don't think you're weird. If I hold a view that you think, I'm not a bigot or anything like that. I'm actually very libertarian. So as long as you leave the kids alone. But so again, if you ever want to be on the show and you want to co-host, and we can also do sports. If you are a guy, we can do weekly sports updates too, especially as we get into Saturday football and Sunday. Now, I will tell you when football starts, we may be doing this kind of early in the morning on Saturdays. Why? Because by the time kickoff happens, I'm watching football, and I can't live stream the game. I can only live stream the audio, I think, but yeah, we can't live stream the game because actually I can't even live stream the audio. I think it has to be in the background, but I mean we can go over the different scores all throughout the day if you want. We can stay on all day and just do recaps of what's going on in the scores, especially if you have a favorite football team. We can follow it. Mine is Michigan, go blue. If you look behind me, I am Detroit everything. Detroit Tigers, Pistons, Red Wings, Lions. Now I watch mostly the Lions, probably followed by the Tigers, then the Pistons and the Red Wings. This is a weird year because everything is actually going well this year for Detroit overall. So usually one team's doing well or no team's doing well, and then one team's doing well and they're not. Also, if you ever go to Detroit, that's why I have exit 69 Big Beaver Road. That is actually a real thing off I-75. If you're not from Detroit, there is actually an I-7. They had to actually make the sign huge and put it way high in the air because people were going up there and stealing it. So it was never meant to be an innuendo. 69 Big Beaver Road, exit 69 Big Beaver Road. Obviously Michigan is a Native American word. Almost all the words, including Pontiac, a lot of cars were named after Michigan towns like Pontiac, Michigan. Those are all actually Native American tribal words. So Big Beaver Road was probably something that had to do with some sort of Indian term and stuff like that. So, well, let's get into the stories of the day. Now, I am using a third-party program that sometimes does not always go so well, but I think it will go just fine. So we are going to get into it. We are going to actually start off with some economic news. I know it's not the most exciting news in the world, but you know the naysayers have been talking about, oh, the tariffs are going to kill the economy. Trump doesn't know what he's doing. Every economic indicator so far since he's been president has beaten the expectations, beaten the odds. And the liberal media is like, oh my gosh, once again beaten. And Jerome Powell of the Fed and the media still keep saying, oh no, man, that's the good luck is going to come to an end. It's going to come to an end. But he just keeps killing things. And the tariffs are supposed to destroy the economy. It hasn't. It's actually raised wages for the blue collar for the first time since 2017 when he was president and had tariffs. And the biggest blue collar, no joke, first time in 60 years that the blue collar wages have increased so much. Why? Because he's doing two things. He's bringing manufacturing back to the United States via tariffs. And if you don't want to and you still want to sell, you pay tariffs, which brings us to this headline. Treasury posts unexpected surplus in June as tariff receipts surge. And remember, we borrow 40 cents of every dollar that we spend in this country. In other words, when you see them crying about Medicaid cuts or this cut, that cut, yeah, it's unsustainable. Imagine if you had bills at the house, right? And you're doing your bills, but 40% of your bills are going to a credit card that you're never paying down with interest. They'd cut you off. Your credit rating would go to crap, but you'd go to bankrupt, right? Well, that's what we're doing. Now, for the first time in so many months, after May, they had May alone, we had $316 billion budget deficit. That means what we spent in May as a country versus what we were bringing in, $316 billion we had to borrow. June actually saw where we actually got $27 billion extra dollars than what we spent. Why? Because custom duties totaled about $27 billion for the month. That's pretty crazy. Up from $23 billion in May, and a 301% gain from when Biden was in office, June 2024. That's amazing news, folks. So, the Treasury reported a $27 billion surplus in June, a stark shift after a $316 billion deficit in May. This turnaround was largely driven by surging tariff receipts In tariffs alone, they collected $27 billion, up from $23 billion in May. So 100% of their surplus came from tariffs. Fiscal year to date, we actually spent fiscal year to date. We have overspent by $1.34 trillion. So this is the month of June, so that's exactly halfway through. So we are on track. If we kept the same without this surplus that just happened, we are on track to overspend by $2.68 trillion. Now, 1 trillion is 1,000 billions. Okay? Or a million millions. That's 1 trillion. It's astronomical. You can't even put your mind around how much money that is that we're accumulating debt. And that's why when we get into later news, when Trump's so mean, man, he just announced that $40 billion of cuts are coming to any program that goes to, no matter the age, an illegal immigrant. It sounds crappy, it sounds harsh, but we don't have the money in this country to do that. And they say, oh, well, he just passed his tax cut for billionaires. Yeah, but if we can, the only way that we don't have a revenue problem in this country, as in taxes. We have a spending problem in this country. So if we could fix that through, seriously, just by growing our way out of it, which is the only way that we can get a budget surplus. That's the only way that homeboy Bill Clinton not balanced the budget with the Republicans in Congress. It's because the economy grew due to the .com bubble that later bursted. But so that's the only way that we're gonna start paying down debt, is to grow our way out of this. And tax cuts equal growth. And had they not passed that, by the way, it would have been the largest tax cut or tax increase in history, because they were temporary tax cuts under the first Trump administration. And so they were the largest tax cuts in history. Had they allowed that to lapse, it would have been the largest tax increase in history, and would have put us in a definite huge recession. So we needed that. You're going to see us grow our way out of this. The tariffs are going to help. The tariffs alone. So the bill is supposed to cost, I think, add 3 something trillion dollars to the debt, but $2 trillion of that, CBO even estimates that they didn't even account for $2 trillion over the next 10 years in tariff income coming in. So it's not going to be near as bad as they think it is. So yeah, it's supposed to projected add 3.4 trillion to the national debt over the next decade, 3.4 trillion. However, the CBO, who scores that, Congressional Budget Office, is supposed to be nonpartisan, but it's in D.C., where 9 out of 10 people are naturally liberal, and so all the workers are liberal. But they intentionally did not count in the tariffs and the revenue. Well, now we see the tariff revenue is working based on this story here. We actually have a surplus in June. First time in probably forever. So that's actually some really, really cool, good news. Glad to see that happening. All right, let's go on to the next thing, which brings me to this next guy, Jerome Powell. Now, see, he was a Trump appointee, so I didn't think he was going to be that bad back when he came in. And he's actually turned out to be quite an insider, deep swamp POS. So during what Jerome Powell is, he's Fairman Fed chair, and what he's in charge of is deciding what the interest rates are going to be. So currently he has them jacked up because he still believes that the tariffs are going to cause inflation. And how do you beat inflation? You have to pretty much try to create a recession to do that. And by raising interest rates, less people buy houses, less companies borrow money to invest in their companies and stuff like that. It's slowing down the economy on purpose because the inflation went so out of control under the Biden administration. However, since Trump's been in office, he's beat every inflation marker. Inflation's sitting, the goal is 2.0%. It was all the way up to almost 10% or higher under Biden, and Trump has gotten it down to about 2.3 or 2.4. So what he's saying is, hey, dude, cut the interest rate so that we can spur more economic growth. Plus, remember that debt that we were talking about? That $36 trillion in debt based on this story? That affects the interest rates that we pay on our own debt. So we could actually cut hundreds of billions of dollars in interest. Right now, our country is paying more in interest, just the interest payment, than we pay on our national defense, which is our second largest expenditure. That is nuts. Imagine it, the interest payment alone on our debt is more than almost anything else we spend on in our country. That's unsustainable. But we could immediately cut that if Powell would just cut the interest rates by half a point, 2 points. And what's funny is he did it during the Kamala Biden re-election campaign. He did it for no reason at all, and the economy wasn't doing near as good. The inflation was way higher, and he still cut. Why? Because he was trying to keep Trump out of office. He's a never-Trumper. Well, Trump's going to try to push him out somehow. He's considering resigning because now, come to find out, this guy who's appointed, who it's almost impossible to fire him, even though Trump's trying to, going to find out he's in charge of a $2.5 billion headquarters. Why does the Fed chair need a $2.5 billion headquarters? The Pentagon, I don't even think costs that much. Maybe it does. So a senior Trump official said Friday that the Fed chair, Jeremy Powell, is considering resigning as pressure grows for an investigation into whether he lied to Congress. That's a felony. Lying to Congress or the FBI or any federal thing under oath is a 5-year felony. That's what almost got Bill Clinton out of office. In fact, a lot of convictions that you see of politicians, whatever they're originally investigating for, they usually don't even charge them with them. They charge them with the lying part. So, and if he got caught lying to Congress, this Congress is going to refer it to Pam Bondi, who is going to probably prosecute. And by the way, when they say, oh, it's lawfare, they're going after politicians. First of all, they're doing it for legit reasons. But they went after Trump for no reason. He was a former president, but they wanted to keep him from running for re-election because they were scared, rightfully so, because he actually won. So, Fed Chair Reserve Jerome Powell is reportedly considering stepping down amid growing pressure. Yes, he's under a lot of pressure. Follows criticism over a lavish $2.5 billion renovation project for his Washington, D.C. headquarters, dubbed the Palace of Versailles, which is exactly what they have. That's the palace in France, the royal palace. I want to see a picture of this. Is it already built? Let me see here. Let me copy here. Let me go to another tab here and see if we can search the web for this thing. Oh, wow. Okay, let's go to the story real quick.
Let's bring in Taylor Riggs, co-host of The Big Money Show, right here on Fabulous Fox Business, and John Carney, Breitbart News and co-author of the daily Breitbart Business Digest. Thanks to both of you for coming on. Here it is. Federal Reserve blows a $2.5 billion. I'm just reading the tear sheet headline from the New York Post. $2.5 billion on a Palace of Versailles headquarters, despite mounting losses. Congress must put its foot down. John Carney, I appeal to you. Who will put their foot down? And it's an ugly building. Wait till you see the building. It's just a nothing burger, typical modernistic glass building. Not even a single column to be seen. At least the McChesney Martin building across the street had a nice columnar entryway, if that's the right word. Columnar, I don't know. I'm back from vacation. I can't hardly talk. What do you think, John?
So they estimate that the actual Palace of Versailles would cost $5 billion.
Really?
And it's beautiful. It is a beautiful building. $5 billion is what it would cost to pay today. It does not look anything like that. At least if you're going to spend $2.5 billion, make it a big, beautiful building. Donald Trump should give them a call. He knows about building. He should call them up and say, guys, why are you building this Soviet-style block building and not something that the public can look at as a treasure for itself?
Taylor, I appeal to your aesthetic senses about this.
Let's do it. We talked to Kevin O'Leary on it, and he's a huge fan about getting the private sector. He's like, they should have called me. We would have taken private sector bids for it. I'd put a restaurant in the lobby called Eat with the Fed, Dine with the Fed. You could sit next to a chart of M2 Money Supply.
You could turn the dials yourself.
Yeah, exactly. On and off, right? How you want to think about QE versus QT. And so in all seriousness, I think just sort of the frustrations are, did I read a private elevator for Federal Reserve officials? Okay, they might need that for security, blah, blah, blah. But it's just more the optics of it, I think, where people are thinking, wait a minute, we're all sort of struggling.
At a time of Doge in Washington, D.C.
And I think Doge it's over budget and overrun. And so I think people are thinking, wait a minute, is this what we need at this moment?
So there you go. That's why they're trying to force him to resign, which they should. I mean, that's crazy. $2.5 billion for this headquarters here. Let's see it again. I mean, seriously? I mean, it's not a bad looking building, but not $2.5 billion worth. So it's always easier. There was a politician that said it's always easier to spend somebody else's money. Or the problem with big government or socialism is eventually you run out of other people's money to spend. Yes, sir. You do run out of other people's money to spend. Or yes, ma'am, if you're on the show as well. All right, so yeah, so that's that story there. So this guy who could literally help save the economy is actually costing us tons of money. $2.5 billion for his headquarters. For a government agency that you hardly ever even see. And I'm sure they have a lot of statisticians there and people that got to go to work and all that stuff. But they need to do what Trump was originally going to do. Start moving these agencies out of D.C., first of all. I know D.C. is a federal enclave. That's why they can't have statehood. It's unconstitutional. Constitution says that there will be a district of land that can be no more than 10 miles by 10 miles, or 10 square miles maybe. I think, 10 square miles. It can be no larger than that, and that's where the government sits, and that way no state has control over the federal government. It's an actual district. And people say, well, this should get statehood because it's taxation without representation. Well, they allow people to live in D.C., but the fix would be, okay, close down anybody living in D.C., move them to Virginia or Maryland, and problem solved. Or you could choose to live near work, but realize you're not going to get exact representation. They do have a delegate, but they're not going to give it statehood. Democrats want statehood because the Senate's so evenly divided all the time that they'd be in a permanent majority, because if no matter how small a state is, you get 2 senators, and they would be for surely Democrats in that deep state swamp. So Bill Pulte, who heads Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, suggested on social media that Powell may not finish his term. Hopefully not. Another senior official cited credible sources indicating Powell feels fatigued and overwhelmed by the controversy. But not just that controversy. He knows what he's doing. We could save so much money on the national debt over the next 10 years if he would just cut interest rates. Take a chance. I mean, we're down near the 2%. There's a liberal economist when I was in grad school. Yep, I don't look like I don't have degrees, but I do actually have a master's degree, and from Creighton University, go Blue Jays, Omaha, Nebraska, if you're watching from there. But one liberal economist says there's no reason why we're not running 4% inflation every year if it means more jobs, and that was a liberal economist. But so the renovations costs and possible $700 million in over expenditures. That's the problem with DC. You budget something, it's always goes over the budget. That's why Trump's such a real estate guy, and that's why he says there's no excuse. Like Gavin Newsom and his billions and billions that have been spent, $100 billion, and not one track has been laid for a rail that was supposed to go from San Francisco to LA or something like that, to Sacramento, San Francisco, LA. It was supposed to be a super high-speed rail. Trump has labeled Powell, quote, too slow over rate decisions, and recently appointed 3 new members to the Planning Commission overseeing federal development projects, which was seen as a strategic move to push Powell out. I think it's pretty smart business. This is this guy actually appointed by Trump, but turned out to be Trump's whole first term was that way. Poor guy. In fact, he admitted, he's like, I didn't think we were really going to win. I mean, we thought maybe it's going to be close, and we knew we had energy, but by the time he won, he only had 100 days to prepare from being a real estate TV guy to actually being president of the United States. So he took a lot of advice, kept a lot of insiders in Washington, and they destroyed him. They destroyed his first term. That's why the second term, he's so effective. He's done more in 6 months than anybody in my lifetime. He's the most effective president I've seen in my lifetime, including Ronald Reagan. And the reason why is because he hunkered down. Instead of taking victory laps or vacations, he went to Mar-a-Lago after he won his re-election and sat there for hundreds, thousands of hours, whatever. 3 months. I mean, at least probably 50, 60, 80 hours a week, hunkered down, finding what executive orders they're going to start off with. They planned out his whole agenda, who is going to be in charge of what cabinet. The guy has been effective. Now it's coming He's made his first big mistake, and I think we're going to go over it a little bit with this Epstein file thing, but we'll go over that in a little bit. So this is Powell. He was appointed by Donald Trump, and he's turned out to be a deep state swamp guy who actually tried to help Kamala win. You can't trust these insiders. They need to do what Trump said he was going to do and move all of D.C. minus, let's say, the Pentagon, anything Congress, White House, Pentagon, some of the very core things that have to be in D.C. in order to function, to keep our country safe. All the other agencies need to be moved out into the breadbasket, into the middle America. It would create jobs. It would create diversity in government employment. It would be so much better. So, and it'd be cheaper. The amount of wages that they're paying in D.C. versus, because yeah, there's a set wage scale in the federal government, but it's also tied to geographical location where you get extra percent on your income. So it'd be way cheaper. Talk about fraud, waste, and abuse. All right, here's a kind of a feel-good story. So if you're from Michigan like I am, you learn about Henry Ford and how good he was to his workers. And it wasn't that he was good to his workers. It was that he wanted a stable workforce to work the assembly line. He is the father of the assembly line, Henry Ford. And so apparently this Ford, he's kind of trying to take the same playbook and say, hey, look, during the contract negotiations in 2019, he realized that his lowest wage workers in the factory were making about $17 an hour, decent benefits though, but they're having to work side jobs just to survive. And so he was talking about this story here is saying that basically he wanted to take a play out of the original Ford, Henry Ford, and yeah, now, you gotta understand, Hershey Park in Hershey, Pennsylvania, which is where the Hershey factory is, was created as a free place for his workers and their families could go and have, a good time. All those little houses like in Flint, Michigan and in Detroit, they all look the same, and they were like these little middle-class homes. Those were actually built by the auto industry so that they could attract workers to come up in there. And I think that they were given to them either at real low rent or for free. So it used to be corporate responsibility was there to take care of the worker. We've lost that, and I would never replace capitalism, definitely with socialism, and definitely with government-mandated socialism. But it used to be that you did take care of your workers. Laying off people was an unheard of phenomenon until the modern era. You never tried to cut costs by cutting out your humans back in the day because you cared about them. You knew their families. The CEO and the employee were a lot closer together. There was a lot flatter of organizations in some sense. But there was a sense of justice that you had where, like, hey, let's try to keep them on as long as we possibly can. But layoffs were like the last resort back in the day. Now it's all about that. Second thing, I see memes all the time that talk about, back in the day, the mom didn't have to work, dad could work and still had, a middle-class home, and cars and lived in a nice middle-class community. Well, our idea of living standards back then are a lot less. Back in the day, if you had 1.5 bathrooms, 2 toilets, one bathroom for everybody sharing a separate toilet, you were like considered wow. Nowadays, middle class has to have big mansions. I live in I downsized when I moved to where I moved to. And I moved from prior to divorce and when my kids were younger, I ended up having 5-bedroom, 4-bathroom house. And that was considered maybe slightly upper middle class, but it was still in the middle class range. That would have been filthy rich back in the day, those living standards. And now I'm in a townhouse that I own, that I bought brand new, and it's still 3-bedroom, 3-bath, and 2 of the bedrooms are master bedrooms with master bathrooms. So, and that would be considered basically middle class way of life now in America. So our living standards. Oh, and by the way, if you had a family car, and sometimes maybe a small little camper, maybe a boat or whatever if you lived near water, but it was really different. The idea of the middle class is totally different back then. Now we'd call it poverty if you lived in what was considered a middle class home with only one car. Everybody has to share a bathroom, and so if we still live that way, yeah, one person still could just work and survive. So That's the difference. So when people say, "Oh my God," that, and also our insurance, our healthcare is so much more advanced and so much more expensive. Remember, our employers pay for that. Most Americans' health insurance comes from their employer, and that's part of your total compensation. But if you ever go to Europe, where everybody's like, "Oh, socialism, everybody lives happy and all that," nobody lives in. Very few people have their own single family home. When I was living in Germany, most people own or rent an apartment or a flat, as they call it, for years and years, a whole life. Home ownership is very low over there. So our poorest people in America actually live just as good as the middle class in Europe. No joke. So, anyways, Ford here. Jim Farley, CEO Jim Farley, was told by veteran employees that young workers didn't want to work at Ford due to low wages and high stress. Some were working shifts at Amazon. In addition to Ford surviving on minimal sleep and struggling financially, so they were worn out when they got to work. Inspired by Henry Ford's 1914 decision to raise factory wages, Farley pushed for better pay and full-time status for temporary workers, taking temp workers and making them full-time. That way they get benefits. And then these changes gave workers access to higher wages, profit sharing, and improved healthcare because they got the actual company benefits. What does this mean? Farley advocates for stronger trade education in the U.S. Yes, we have pushed everybody to college. I remember when I was young, if you had an associate's degree, you were actually, wow, kind of all that in a bucket of chicken. And then it became a bachelor's degree. And now master's degrees are like, oh, okay, yeah, 1 in 4 people have one of those, right? So this is what Germany does right. So, and he even points to the way Germany does it. In Germany, when you hit about the 10th or 11th grade, in Ohio, a lot of Ohio is doing this, and I do not like Ohio because of Ohio State. I like Ohio people, but Ohio State University, boo. Anyways, what they do in 10th or 11th grade is they actually take you at 10th or 11th grade and say, okay, what do you want to be? What do you want to do? And if it's something that needs a college education, like being a doctor, or a lawyer, or a school teacher, or whatever, then you go the college route. But the rest of the people are put into a trade. So they still get their math, their English, or science, and all the cores to graduate. But by the time they get out of high school, most of them are certified as construction workers, forklift operators, electricians, stuff like that. And then if they need follow-on education, they do an apprenticeship. It worked well. It works well for Ohio, too, and other states that are trying this. All this college education stuff, I think most people should opt to at least go into the Army Reserves, Marine Corps Reserves. If you're a female or you're not into the Army or Marine type life, go to the Navy or Air Force Reserves. And one, it pays for your education, but two, it gives you that discipline to actually go to school and pass. Had I not gone to the military, I would have never gone on to get a bachelor's degree, let alone graduate degrees. So, very important. So, in the U.S., manufacturing jobs average about $25 an hour, below the national average salary of $66,600. But a lot of that's inflated because some of us work in tech and stuff like that. So when you talk about salaries being average of $66,600, I don't know if that's a family average or is that the actual average wage in the United States. I'm not sure. In 2023, a major UAW strike reflected ongoing worker frustrations. He emphasized that solving these workforce issues requires broader support beyond Ford's efforts. Yes, one, tariffs, baby. Use the tariffs to bring back manufacturing. Lower taxes, which is what Trump did so that we spur more investment into our workers. But then you tax those that want to, you want to build your Ford in Mexico and try to import it here? You're going to pay a tariff on it. That way it evens out those wage disparities between the countries. Kudos to him. I'm all about corporate. I'm not in any way for government mandated stuff like that. But when CEOs do it on their own, I love it. I think it's great. I'm going to just watch a little bit of this. It's about teacher layoffs.
And I'm not sure how because I didn't think we had any of the DEI words. But yeah. As of now, I'm unemployed, I guess.
You're fired.
So that's talking about teacher layoffs. Teachers are in a predicament, man. First of all, we need to get rid of the unions. But at the same time, we also need to fix the family and the classrooms. And the unions and their wokeness and all the woke in schools are out of control. there's a big learning gap between, say, minority populations, Hispanic, African Americans, and whites and Asians. And why is that? Well, one, the makeup of the family is different. There's a mom and a dad home, or less people in just single family homes. So I'm not going against single parents in any way. There's a lot of great single parents out there. Again, not every smoker gets lung cancer. Not every kid that plays in the road is going to get hit by a car. However, it's a good idea, and it does take a lot to raise a child. And if you're working 2-3 jobs to make ends meet because you've had 2 or 3 babies from parents that aren't multiple baby daddies not paying child support, which kudos to Michigan, they have the highest enforcement because they realize the more they can force these dads to actually step in and pay their child support, the less welfare costs there are. But I digress on that. You can't sit there and blame teachers for learning outcomes when the kids come to school unfed, unwell, raised by the streets, undisciplined, all that stuff. So what happens? They get mad when the courts get involved and become daddy. So some states like Texas are very strict. You disrupt the classroom, you're going to jail or juvie. Now, I think that there should be a step later. First offense, you see the principal. Parents are called. Second offense, you get some sort of in-school suspension. You disrupt the class third time in a year, you have to go before the judge. Now, juvenile justice system is meant for that. It's meant to rehabilitate, not to punish. So we can't be soft on them. There still has to be consequences, community service, fines, and sometimes they set up peer courts among other students. So you might do that as the first judicial offense. That doesn't go on your record. But eventually we have to get the classes under control. If it's taking a teacher, let's say a class is 55 minutes long because there's a 5-minute intermission where you go to your next class, right? The bell rings and then the bell rings again, right? If it's taking inner city schools 35 minutes just to calm all the kids down, to deal with the disruptive thug that the woke liberal politicians and the unions want to hug them instead of punish them, eventually, again, first they go to the principal, parents called. If that doesn't work, second time they mess up, they get some sort of in-school suspension. They mess that up, then they go before juvenile justice, and maybe we have in-house education for them in jail, right? But what we can't do is keep being soft. It's kind of like what we're doing with all these protesters, and we're going to get to that with what Trump is saying about these bricks being thrown at government vehicles and people trying to unalive ICE agents. Eventually, you have to get tough. You can't hug the thug for life and think, oh my God, they're going to learn. They're not. They need some tough love. Now, I'm not in any way advocating going back to spanking children in school and stuff like that, but we can still be tough and fix this. Again, if you compare, just go public school to public school, not even the private schools. Public school to public schools, typically suburban, wealthier areas where the families are intact. They have orderly lives where they go to bed fed on time, all that stuff. They tend to do better. There's a big achievement gap. Because when you go to a class in a suburban school, there's more education time. Not that there's more minutes in an hour in a suburban school versus an urban school. In an urban school, though, if it takes 30 minutes to calm everybody down, get the thug out of the classroom so that you can finally learn, what do you got left? 25 minutes of education. And a suburban school, God forbid you call their parents are going to come and get them, punish them and stuff. There's more backup. So let's say it takes 5 minutes calling the kids down. Now they're getting 50 minutes of education. That's double the education per hour. You times that by all the school hours from K to 12th grade, there's your achievement gap right there. Because they're getting half the education. Because half the educated time in these inner city schools is trying to deal with problem children. Plus, they have teacher burnout, so the teachers are younger because they're coming in right out of college, getting burned out, moving to the suburbs, getting a better job. And it's not cost per pupil either. They always say, oh, well, suburban schools are just richer. If you look at Baltimore City schools and New York City schools and stuff, the amount of money that they pay per pupil is much higher than other parts of the state with lower outcomes. 1, teachers' unions. 2, burned out teachers from having to deal with not getting backup from the administration. Teachers that are threatened with guns. Unruly kids never get to do what they love to do, which is teach. It only makes sense. It really does. So, that's my idea on how we're going to fix the schools. moving over to this Russia's pissing me off. Vladimir Putin, I think, is overplaying his hand. And Trump is finally starting to get tired of it. Trump is giving him the benefit of the doubt. Trump said, hey, he was going to try to end the war on day one. Putin is stringing him along. This, their defense secretary over in Putin land in Russia is out of his mind. But it might be time for us to get tough and actually back up Ukraine. And I wasn't for it at all. And a lot of people are still going to fight us on it because it's not our war, and it's not our war. But eventually, Russia needs to get the hint, because now he's talking about working with North Korea to build up their nuke program even further with ballistic missiles. And unlike the pragmatist Xi Jinping of China, or even Vladimir Putin of Russia, who would never really send a nuke our way, Kim Jong-un is crazy. And his sister, who might be taking over for him, is even crazier. And if they get long-range ballistic missiles with their already nuke program, which should have been stopped under the Clinton administration, but they weren't tough enough, that's not good. So Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov visited North Korea and expressed support for Pyongyang's nuclear ambitions. Lavrov stated Moscow, quote, respects, unquote, North Korea's atomic development and emphasized it was homegrown without direct Russian assistance. Lies. They actually help each other out. North Korea actually sends workers, temp workers, to do forestry and all that in Russia at slave wages, and all that money goes back to the North Korea regime, not even the family of the worker. Very little goes back to the family of the worker. And if they defect, they tell them they're going to unalive their whole family. He hinted at a possible resumption of dialogue between Pyongyang and Washington, because Trump's like, hey, yeah, sure, I'll talk to Kim Jong-un again. At least he talks. That's what I love about Trump, too. He's so different than the neocons and even the liberals. At least he talks. And so that's what's going to happen there. Let's see here. Let's go to our first immigration story real quick. So it's Ontario, California. Now, here's what gets me is like they don't think like they're supposed to go into these. If an immigrant runs from outside into a surgical center, first of all, they're calling it, oh, they're in the hospital. No, they're not. It was a surgical day center, like I was in yesterday for my scope. Okay. The guy ran into there. They're pursuing that guy. And yeah, he went into the medical office. So he got pursued into the medical office. Otherwise, everybody just run into the medical office. And it's not just immigration. We always treat immigration differently anyways. If you were getting chased for a DUI, a suspected DUI, and you got out of your car and you ran into that medical office, local police would follow you. So why is ICE, a federal agent, any different? Democrats are so bass backwards. Whoops, what happened? Let's see. Oh, of course, they got to get their revenue. Don't mind. It's called good old capitalism. Let's see what goes on.
Mr. Yan was doing his job. He was outside of this clinic doing his job with the landscaping company.
He's just doing his job.
He was approached by someone armed and masked. He runs into this clinic asking for support, asking for help, where then the armed gentleman again comes in masked, and the staff at this point also begins to feel worried and concerned for their safety. They start asking this person to identify himself, to show ID, to show a badge, to show a warrant, and they also remind him, you're in private property. We don't feel comfortable with this. You need to leave or you're not going to present identification. So,
okay, so maybe my eyesight's not that great, and maybe I got to pump this up just a little bit more. Let's see if I can. What does it say on the back of this vest right here? I know on front it says something. It says police. Police, ICE. So they're making it sound like, oh my God, he ran out of fear, ran into there. Okay, so then when he ran in there, and they told him, okay, we're the police, ICE, all these do-gooders step in their way. Oh, you don't have a judicial warrant. First of all, you don't need a judicial warrant. 8 U.S. Code, which covers Immigration Nationality Act, says that a civil warrant, because it is a civil crime, basically a subpoena that you're serving on them, is good enough to get these people into custody. Criminal warrants are for criminals. they are made for people that are going to be charged in court. Now, if all these immigrants want to get charged in court, it's $1,000 fine per day that you've been in the country illegally. I don't know if you want $1 million fine, some jail time. So all this nonsense about, oh, you need a judicial warrant. Yes, you do. If they're coming after them for a criminal violation, but if it's for a civil deportation, you do not need a criminal warrant. And by the way, this due process talk that they're all talking about, due process is different based on the level, based on who you are, first of all, where you are in the country. First, so if you just came into the country within 2 years and you're within 100 miles of the border, you don't even have to see an immigration judge. They can deport you, especially if you're from Mexico. That's the due process. And then you get more due process. If you're in the interior, you've been here for longer than 2 years, you have the right to an attorney paid for by you, unlike what that judicial ruling is. And you can check a video out about that. Might go into it in a little bit. And then second, then you have other due process that gets more. Let's take it to what we can understand, because most of us aren't here undocumented, right? The due process for a traffic violation is totally different than a misdemeanor, which is totally different than for a felony, which is totally different for a capital case. You see how that goes? When you get a traffic citation, which could even result in minimal jail time or a hefty fine of under $1,000 or whatever, you typically don't get the due process of a court-appointed lawyer for a traffic citation. However, if it becomes a misdemeanor and above, you get a court-appointed attorney if you can't afford one. But even then, the due process is usually done at a magistrate or a lower level judge. But then if you are on a felony level, then those have to go before a grand jury, which you might not even know is going on, but there's a grand jury typically in most states and the federal government who's hearing the case and the evidence before they even indict you, right? That's part of your due process. And then on top of that, you go to court. So you see how the due process level increases? So when they keep talking about all this due process, not everybody is entitled to go before a judge. Again, if you've been in the country less than 2 years and you're within a certain amount of miles within the border, it's just like within 100 miles of the border, did you know you can get pulled over and randomly inspected by Border Patrol? And it's not unconstitutional. It's a law that's within 100 miles of all the border. That's why a lot of Michigan, you'll see Border Patrol once in a while in Michigan. And they can have border checkpoints. Because different rights are expressed differently based on the totality of the circumstances. So all this due process talk is just liberal nonsense in the media who's covering for it. So here they go. They're going to yell about a lawyer.
Seeing Mr. Guillen struggling to even speak, right? Here, seeing the fear in his face, hearing it in his voice.
Of course he's scared. He's getting ready to be deported. I know it's not the end of the world. He's not going to prison. It's lower due process, but he's still going to get deported. He came here illegally. He's getting deported. Of course there's fear in his. It isn't because he didn't know that was ICE. Yeah, they have a mask on because people like you and the Democrats and the politicians and the leadership of the Democrat Party are all about doxing them. And look at we're going to see a story, and I've also posted on another video, how many attacks just since July 1st, deadly attacks on ICE there were.
It just breaks your heart, right? Realizing that, again, this
it does break your heart.
Is someone that is working.
Biden should never let him in.
Trying, working, seeking a better life, and is now between armed, masked men with
that lady right there
and nurses.
They need to put a stop to that nonsense.
What's going on?
I don't care if she's a nurse. And that doctor too. You put your hands on a law enforcement agent and you're preventing arrest, that is a felony now. They are committing a felony.
To actually exercise their rights. In no way are they intervening. They're exercising the right to know who is in this building with a weapon, right? And I think it's important to note that that what they did is commendable, and it is brave.
There you go. You're touching a federal agent. He even said it. You're interfering with a federal agent.
Imagine a full.
Ridiculous what these Democrats are letting get away with. This right here is that ruling. A ruling yesterday came out from another activist judge. Craziness. I did a whole video on it, again, about due process and stuff. This judge is saying that ICE can no longer do roving patrols. And if they do them, they cannot take into effect the skin color, which is already illegal anyways. But you can take skin color in a totality. There's a little bit of gray area there. You can't take into effect the accent or the language being spoken or where they're hanging out or working. Not to even go up and talk to them for a consensual encounter to build probable cause, which happens every day in America. When you get pulled over, a lot of times they're talking to you, hey, where'd you come from? Where you go? You don't have to answer those questions, but they're doing that to see if you're up to no good beyond just a headlight being out or running a stop sign. Maybe you have, maybe they're listening to you talk or smelling for alcohol. See if you have a DUI, which takes it to a whole nother level of due process. Especially if it's your second offense or more. It could be a felony, right? So cops do it all the time. Why can't these cops do it? This judge is saying that they can't. And oh, by the way, remember I said immigration arrest is civil and they have the right to an attorney, but they have to pay for it themselves. This judge is trying to say, oh no, government, you have to pay for it. So now this judge, this Biden appointed, probably a DEI hired judge, doesn't seem very smart because I read her opinion. It was all over the place compared to other opinions I've read from all races of jurists. She's just not smart. And she's saying, hey, no, you got to provide a lawyer too, as if you're in a criminal court. Miranda, you have the right to an attorney if you can't afford one will be appointed to you. That does not apply to civil immigration enforcement. Let's see.
Now to some breaking news overnight, with a federal judge ruling immigration officials in Southern California cannot detain someone solely based on their race or the language they speak. NBC's White House correspondent Yamiche Alcindor is traveling with the president this morning. She's near his New Jersey estate. Yamiche, good morning.
Good morning, Laura. In a lawsuit that could have national repercussions, late Friday
night, won't. It's going to get appealed, overturned.
Directed immigration agents to stop racially profiling in the course of seeking out immigrants and mandated.
Of course, they're seeking out immigrants. That's their job. Immigration Customs Enforcement. What do the liberals don't get about this? Of course, they're seeking out immigrants. Now, let's say, and this is in my video. Let's say you're a cop, right? And your beat tonight is an Asian community in any big city, usually called like Chinatowns or something like that, right? So you're in Chinatown of any big city, you're the cop, and before you got on shift, they said, hey, there's been a rash of jewelry burglaries at nighttime. What we found so far is that they tend to be white males with an Eastern European accent or language that they're speaking. Keep an eye out. And so you're on your patrol, 2 a.m. For no reason, there's 3 or 4 people, rightfully, they have a right to stand, they're talking around. You roll down your window and you hear Eastern European accent. Okay, now they're in an Asian part of the community, a block away from a jewelry store. For some weird reason, at 2 or 3 a.m, they're standing around having a conversation, and you hear that they are either speaking an Eastern dialect or a language or an Eastern European accent, right? It would be good police work for you to go up there and have what's called a consensual encounter and say, hey, guys, are you guys okay? What are you guys up to? Try to talk to them and see, hey, are these the suspects we've been that have been doing all this? It's no different for ICE. If ICE knows that day laborers and undocumented tend to hang out in Home Depot parking lots and they're asking for work, they don't speak English, and yeah, they're either Latino or, let's say, Asian, it's probably good police work to go up and say, hey, how y'all doing? You guys doing okay? And, hey, can I see your ID? They don't have to show it if they don't want to. But it's called a consensual encounter. Police do it every single day. This judge is all for a rocker. And then to say, hey, you're guaranteed an attorney. Now, she said you're guaranteed access to an attorney. Sure, at your own expense. Same with a traffic ticket for us.
That the federal government ensure detainees have access to lawyers. The judge granted 2 temporary restraining orders in response to a lawsuit.
She said access to lawyers, but I read the opinion. It says at no cost to the detainee.
Last week by immigrant advocacy groups. A fuller hearing is expected in the coming weeks. Laura.
She's an idiot. It's going nowhere. It's absolutely going nowhere.
A new survey from the Brennan Center for Justice finds 46% of election officials
if you're breaking the law, they just found more voter fraud like crazy. Of course, Democrats in Texas or somewhere. Yeah, I think Texas. I don't have that story lined up.
North Korean dictators are expected.
Oh, South Carolina. I have an alligator in my backyard. I live in South Carolina. They'll leave you alone. Most of them they want little animals. They don't really want humans. That's a big one. Let's see what this was. Alligator. Oh, Myrtle's Inlet. Yeah, right down the road from Myrtle Beach. That's crazy.
A court threw out an agreement that
a major healthcare tax break that helped millions afford insurance is now missing. President Donald Trump signed the One Big Beautiful Bill Act into law on July 4th, but it left out enhanced premium tax credits for the Affordable Care Act.
That
Health
might be a
experts
problem.
say that move could send ACA premiums higher in 2026, up more than 75% for some families. Head of the California...
I can't lose again this year.
We're not going to watch another
Yeah, I got
commercial.
with Copilot.
But it sucks, but, you know, and yeah, people might lose
Medical
health care.
Association says patients will delay care, get
sicker, and it does cost more over the long run, but we got to fix this healthcare spending. And he's doing it. He's the first president that's taken on and say, hey, pharmaceuticals, why does Canada get $5, let's say, insulin, and we pay $105 per shot of insulin? Why? We're the richest country. We buy more than anybody else. So if we're buying in bulk, why is it? And it's because they put price controls on it. So then what we say, okay, hey, Canada, since you're price controlling our companies or pharmaceuticals, and we don't because we believe in free market capitalism, and now we're paying for all the research costs and they're making their profits off us while they're just breaking even with you guys, then we're going to tariff you. Or we'll put an export ban where our pharmaceutical companies cannot export their medicines to you for the first 5 years that they're out. So any revolutionary cancer drug or drug that can save a life, or Ozempic, which, you know, will fix your fatness and diabetes and stuff, you can't have it for 5 to 7 years unless you agree to share the cost of bring your costs up so we can bring ours down. And Trump's finally doing that, saying, hey, pharmaceuticals, you guys got to do it. In other countries, you guys are going to do it. And I think that with that, we're going to bring down the cost of medicine in this country. Yes, socialized medicine has some upsides, but it also has a lot of downsides, like long waits because surgeons get paid instead of $500,000 a year. There's less surgeons because they're making about what a cop in New York City makes, $100,000 a year. So there's some good things to a free market, nonprofit, especially nonprofit organizations, which most hospitals are nonprofit. Let's be real. They're usually owned by Catholics or, you know, something. But we need to fix that. We need to fix illegals going in and clogging up our healthcare systems and then not paying their bills because they don't have a social security number. There's a lot of things that we can do to bring down the cost of medicine in this country. And then ACA would be a lot cheaper, right? All right, so White House mocks House Democrat for criticizing ICE raid at the marijuana farm. So we all know about the marijuana farm thing that went down. Is it this one? White House mocked Representative Jimmy Gomez from California in a social media post Friday after the lawmaker criticized a raid on large cannabis farm. Now, this cannabis farm was employing 10 underage people who shouldn't even be working at a cannabis farm, regardless of their immigration status, which, by the way, they're all also undocumented. And 9 of them were unaccompanied minors that were lost in the system. So we actually found Biden let in so many unaccompanied minors that they weren't doing DNA tests, weren't checking anything. They're like, oh, you're the uncle? Sure, here, cartel member, take them. And who knows where they're at. And they're trying to find them. Tom Homan has a big mission about finding all these kids that are missing. But they're like, yeah, sure. Oh, you're Uncle Bob? Sure, here you go, pedophile. I mean, it was like crazy. They didn't check any of these. Well, they found 9 of them working on this cannabis farm. The media won't report that. The media's not reporting any of that. No, you're taking the farmers away. Well, they had an actual warrant to go on that property. They had already been there June, so you'd have thought the cannabis farm would have learned their lesson. And oh, by the way, when you employ undocumented ones, the undocumented ones, not the ones that are on the temporary visas, we do have a visa program where they can come in seasonally and then go back home, seasonally and go back home. And there's a lot that do that. Most of those farm workers are actually legal. But the ones that are illegal, they're either trying to hide something or they didn't want to go through the process to get the farm visa. They come in and all that money goes back to paying back the cartel members that snuck them into the country. So we're actually funding on this marijuana farm or even a strawberry farm or a construction site. If they're newly arrived, more than likely they still have a debt to the cartel. So we're actually paying the cartels with our tax money, or with our money. Also, we could have 25-cent cheaper tomatoes. Let's see what this has to say. It's just music. 79% say immigration benefits U.S. It does. Legal immigration. Quick inflating the two. Gas deployed during ICE raid at South Carolina farm. We're going to go over that in a minute here. What they did in San Francisco and on the same day in that farm raid, these protests are out of control. ICE raids marijuana farms filled with illegal aliens, supposed to reads. Crying Jimmy, they're just strawberry pickers, added. Not quoting the Golden State Democrat. White House continued. That ain't produce, Holmes. That's product. I think the social media team is excellent for Donald Trump. All right, here's where we're going to get really into some of the craziness that's going on. So, Donald Trump declares total authorization for ICE agents. The days of them getting rocks thrown at them and all that stuff, that's deadly force now, and it always has been. So now, if they have to affect the arrest, they're allowed to shoot these rioters now. Florida already put it out. You throw Molotov cocktails, rocks, bricks at our cops, they're authorized to shoot you dead. If you stop traffic and you surround a car, they're allowed to run you over, and there's no prosecution in Florida for that. That's exactly what Trump should have done with this, but he is kind of doing that. President Donald Trump has granted federal immigration agents total authorization to defend themselves following clashes with protesters. Oh, you think, it's just rocks on. That's a deadly weapon. You should watch some of this footage if you haven't seen it yet. He watched in disbelief as, quote, thugs, all caps, were violently throwing rocks and bricks at ICE officers while they were moving down a roadway in their car. And they busted through the windows, and then they started throwing bricks through that hole at the drivers. Called them slime balls. He said, I never want to see a car carrying a law enforcement officer attacked again. Authorization immediately granted for arrest and incarceration. In other words, stop that vehicle, use whatever means you need to, including shooting them if need to be, if they continue to throw deadly objects at you, and take them to jail. Why it matters? Because tensions in California have been running high. Yeah, because California allows that hug a thug crap. Democrats love thugs for some reason, and they don't care about the immigrant. They care about future votes. But this hug a thug Democrat priorities is just out of control. Let's watch this Fox News thing. It's actually a really, really good 4-minute section. And while we're playing that, I'm going to take a really quick break to get something to drink. So my camera will go off, but I will continue to play this. All right, we're on mute.
This is numbers about prior administrations removing greater numbers of people than the Trump administration. And during those removals, we did not see violence. We didn't see rocks thrown at vans. We didn't see
we did not.
Followed from the beginning of their trip there. All the
or
way
Democrats
to
doing it too.
It certainly
Leaders.
Somebody tipped them off. So what is going on, Director? Do we have Director Lyons?
Can you hear me now, Martha?
Hi. Okay.
That fool was on mute.
Martha McCallum, thank you, sir. I know you're very busy. Thanks for joining us today. My question to you, if you didn't hear it, was, we just put up this information on the screen that shows that there were more of these workplace operations in prior administrations, and yet they were not met with, people following the vans as they went along and throwing rocks at them, and the violence that your agents are encountering. So what is going on?
No, Martha, thank you for having me today, and I really appreciate you highlighting that, because I was a young agent and a young supervisor back under those administrations, and we didn't have these issues. Now you have people blatantly shooting firearms at federal law enforcement officers. It's incredible. We've always heard from the left and other organizations if ICE only had a criminal warrant. Well, we had a criminal warrant. We were going after a marijuana grow facility, which happens to donate to Governor Newsom. And we did it the right way that everybody wanted, serving a criminal warrant against an American business that's harboring and trafficking illegal immigration. And now that we're finding out, forced labor of children, and here we are being protested against, assaulted, deadly weapons, rocks. It's unacceptable. And Martha, I hate to say it, it's all because of the rhetoric of the left and what a lot of elected officials are putting a bullseye on ICE just for doing their law enforcement mission.
I mean, this is absolute chaos, Director. We're just watching this video again, and things being hauled at these windows. I mean, it's a miracle that none of your agents were killed. I know that you've said this keeps you up at night. How are these agents holding up in the face of having to do their job under these circumstances?
They're holding up great, Martha. They're brave men and women, but I have to tell you, it's getting taxing on them. The workforce is getting tired of this. It's dangerous. Those rocks can actually kill people. I mean,
you see that?
You saw those vehicles being attacked. That's it. I mean, those are deadly weapons, and
those are definitely deadly weapons.
Ability to restraint to make sure that we get our people out safely, but we can't sit back and just
look at the hole there, and then they go and they throw it
and accept charges not being filed
through the same hole. Watch
officials or these protesters. We're going to work with our partners.
And watch, you'll see what they're doing. So as they come out, one guy with a bike is kind of slowing them down for a minute until the agent finally says, "Screw it, I'm going to run you over." But by then they've had like so many bricks and stuff thrown at them. And on this same raid, there was an idiot. There's a $50,000 reward out, but they have video of a person with a piece poo-pooing towards the officers.
We're going to work with the Department of Justice. We're going to hold people accountable. But at the end of the day,
I'm tired of hearing that.
They're going to go home safe. That's my number one responsibility. And the workforce is.
They keep saying they're going to.
We have to take care of these.
They keep saying they're going to hold them accountable, but I watch all these ICE videos where they finally just let the person go. Every person that puts their hand on a police officer in America gets arrested by that cop, and they get charged. And yeah, it's a little more expeditious, and maybe Congress needs to fix the federal criminal system where these things can be handled quicker. But any person who puts their hands on a federal agent during an arrest or detainment, puts their hand, gets charged with obstruction or resisting with violence and all that stuff. They need to start being charged quickly and expeditiously. And that means hiring more magistrates and changing the federal law to where magistrates can handle medium level, lower level felonies, which that would be in some cases, instead of just misdemeanors. If they need to hire more federal magistrates and do something, then do it. Or charge them with the misdemeanor, but there's no leniency. There's no, first time offense, you don't get the 90 days or a year in jail. I think a misdemeanor is up to 90 days in jail, typically. And then, no, I'm sorry, up to a year in jail, and then after a year in jail, it becomes a felony. But anyways, bottom line, put them in jail for a year. Find the crap out of them. Community service the crap out of them. Probate them for 5 years. Put them on probation. But you touch a law enforcement officer, all this, we're going to start holding them accountable. Listen to this guy. I've heard this over and over again. I hear this all the time from the Department of Justice too. But they don't.
We can't sit back and accept charges not being filed against these elected officials
exactly.
or these protesters. We're going to work with our partners, the FBI. We're going to work with the Department
Heard
of
that
Justice.
before.
We're going to hold people accountable. But at the end of the day, ICE officers
Look at
and
him.
agents are going to
remember,
safe. That's my number one responsibility.
Remember, this guy's already got a hole that was thrown through one. Now watch, when this guy gets bottlenecked and stopped because somebody's blocking another car in front of them or blocking him, watch what happens. This guy goes right for the same hole. Look, aims right for the hole. Trying to go for that dude's head. That's a deadly force.
And the workforce is being strained, but we have
this guy right here. You see the guy with the bike?
Men and women.
See how he tried to push the bike in front?
It would be great if California would work with you on this as well. Because
see how he stops him? He ends up running over the bike.
Story.
And that's what they do. That guy was literally working in concert with those thugs, putting the bike out in every time to stop him, so that they'd have a chance to sit there and bash those cars and hopefully the officer with bricks. That is illegal. They need to find them people and prosecute them and make them a freaking example out of them. Make an example out of them. And I'm tired of all the talk too, Pam Bondi. I'm already not happy about your Epstein thing, and either is Dan Bongino. It looks like he might be resigning, and Kash Patel might be too. And this is where Trump, he better get in front of this, because he's very popular right now, but he can go down quick with his MAGA base, because we brought him in to drain the swamp. We also brought him in to put a cent for law and order and put an end to this nonsense here. And that's where Trump got in front of it and said, hey, we're done. We're done. He called the actual Department of Justice and said, that's crazy. Glasshouse Farms were visited today by ICE officials, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, your cannabis growing operation with by the way, one of those unaccompanied minors was 14. So the Department of Labor has actually gotten involved too. It's a whole other part of the federal government to check them out for if they knowingly hired children. He says, therefore, I am directing, saying, hey, you don't have a choice anymore, Noam, Homan, Bondi. Therefore, I am directing Secretary of Homeland Security, Kristi Noem, and Board Czar Tom Homan to instruct all ICE, Homeland Security, or any other law enforcement officer who is on the receiving end of thrown rocks, bricks, or any other form of assault to stop the car, quit running, and arrest these slime balls using whatever means is necessary to do so. That means tase them, shoot them, whatever you have to do. I'm giving total authorization, capitalized, for ICE to protect itself just like they protect the public. I love this part. I never want to see a car carrying a law enforcement officer attacked again. All caps, authorization immediately granted for arrest and incarceration. I love it. He's like, this is an embarrassment. Embarrassment. They sit there and get in your face and berate you. Once they get too close to you, you tell them to back up, you're interfering. There's a Supreme Court precedent that said you have to be at least 10 feet back. You cannot interfere. Back up or you're going to jail. And then you start putting the money and resources into prosecuting these people, and then make an example of them. Don't just do it and not report on it, because the media is not going to report on it. Make an example of them. Now here we go. Maryland man, Kilmar Abrego Garcia case. This judge, first it was Boasberg, now it's this female, another judge appointed by either Obama or Biden, Judge Zinnes, and she's mad because he's now being charged. They brought him back to the country like they were supposed to, only because he had a warrant and was indicted for a felony for trafficking humans back and forth. And yes, he was part of MS-13. It's on his knuckles in code. They even translate it. But Democrats called him Maryland man, father. He was a wife beater too. But she's still getting involved. Because ACLU and his lawyers want him brought back from Tennessee, where he's being criminally prosecuted. And the judge is like, oh, well, we don't have enough to hold him pre-trial, so we're going to give him bail. When ICE is like, okay, cool. Well, we're a different part of the federal government. We're going to take him into custody and deport him. Well, now this federal judge, by the way, judges aren't even supposed to be involved in the immigration process. In fact, the Immigration Nationality Act says that the immigration judge handles whether or not they're incarcerated while they wait, the due process, they make a decision, you're deported, there's a way to appeal that civil, and then if the regular federal judges, the judiciary, Article 2, I believe, they get involved only at the appeals court level. The act specifically said no district judge, low-level, unelected district judge is allowed to get involved. And she's just inserted herself all through this thing, just like every other liberal judge has. Just like that judge that's in California saying that ICE can't do regular patrols anymore, and you have to give them a free attorney. Overstepping. You don't get to make law based on what you think it should be. It is what it is. And Congress, by the way, the only thing in the Constitution says that we have to have a Supreme Court. And they don't even stipulate. Congress can actually lower the Supreme Court to 1 member, 3 members, 7 members, 10 members, 21 members. They decide that. And then every court under the Supreme Court is actually established by Congress. They can take it away. So Congress can say, hey, district court judges, you have no right to look at a case. Any legislation that they want, they can exempt the courts from looking at it. The only one that has a constitutional right to look at it is the Supreme Court. But this judge, looks like all the other liberal judges, get involved because they don't like Trump. Right? So there's our Maryland man. The Maryland man. No, he's an El Salvadoran. And by the way, if you read the actual order, they're all getting it wrong. It said he couldn't go be deported to Guatemala because his family had moved to Guatemala, and that's where he was facing the troubles. There's no order saying he couldn't go to El Salvador. And the media has ran with it, and the government hasn't done enough to get out in front of it and say, hey, our lawyer was an idiot. That's why I got fired, the one that was originally representing the government in this case here under Trump. Oh, okay. U.S. District Judge Paula Zinnes, I think she's out of D.C. or Maryland, has been considering an order that would require the administration to keep Abrego close to Tennessee for 48 hours should the federal judge there decide that he can be released pending trial. So now she's getting involved in telling them, oh, no, you can't deport him. Even though the Supreme Court said, yeah, they can deport to third countries now. He's got a deportation order. He just can't deport him to Guatemala or El Salvador or wherever. Okay? but we can take him to South Sudan. But this judge says, no, I'm the president of the United States, which is better than the other judge we were talking about who's writing law. So now she's Congress, writing law saying they have to have a free attorney. So she is Congress president and judicial branch all in one. Remember, they're co-equal. There's no such thing as judicial supremacy. This one says, hey, look, I got appointed to this judgeship and 50 senators agreed with me. I didn't have to get one vote of the American population. President of the United States, I know you're the only office in the entire republic that one man gets voted on by everybody in the entire country, right? But nah, I'm a judge, a low level, one of, 733 of those judges. I'm one of them, appointed. I got the power. You will not move that person. Supreme Court already struck down nationwide injunctions. Now they're going through class certification. That's going to get struck down too eventually, or Congress has got to fix it. But she says, hey, I'm considering whether or not you have to hold them there for 48 hours. She's like, I want every detail of your deportation plan. They're like, we don't have it yet. Well, that's just like trying to nail Jello to the wall. Why won't you give me your deportation plan? Well, one, because you're against us anyways, even though you're supposed to be fair and impartial. But two, maybe we don't want him to know, in case he is released, our deportation plan, because then he goes on the run and we have to actually go find him again. I can't assume anything to be regular in this highly irregular case, Zinnis had said, right? In sharp exchange, never with his lawyers, always sharp exchange with the Justice Department lawyers, if they can produce the detainer. Where's the detainer for him? Well, we don't have it yet. Give me the detainer. I demand it now. Why do you need a civil detainer, Judge? I want it now. So by later on, even though I had asked for it yesterday, Thursday, so you should have came to court with it. Okay. By the way, they can do like civil contempt and actually have some things, but as soon as they cross over and try to do criminal contempt, it's already well established. President of the United States can pardon that person immediately, and boom, the judge can't enforce against any of his officials, which would cause a constitutional crisis. But they keep talking about the constitutional crisis coming from the executive branch. No, it's these lower level judges that are doing it. Because every one of them, he's had more injunctions than any other president in 6 months than all the last 12 years combined. I mean, it's crazy. They said they were working on it. So, this is about the Dugan trial. We won't get into that today. What's to work on? It's a piece of paper, judge said. She then told the government lawyers that she would have doubts about whether the detainer existed until they provided a copy. But I think you're lying. We're a court of laws. We don't operate on take my word for it. Really? So anytime there's witnesses to a crime, you're not going to take their word for it? About an hour later, Justice Department lawyers produced the detainer and shared it with the court. The tense exchange Friday marked another acrimonious hearing in the legal drama surrounding Maryland man and Abrego. Maryland father. It wasn't Maryland man, it was Maryland father. After he was deported to the notorious Salvadoran prison in March, by the way, he gained weight. Abrego, who crossed the U.S.-Mexico border without authorization around 2011 after fleeing a gang. Oh, wait, they take his word for it that he was fleeing a gang. It's no credible. Where's that? So you won't take Justice Department lawyers' word. Highly educated, barred, officers of the court, but your court of law will take that, right? So bottom line, she rebuked Justice Department attorneys for failing to provide clear answers regarding his potential deportation if released pending trial. She wants to know so that she can overstep her bounds and say, okay, if he's released, you can't deport him, which then will go right up to the appeals court again. The appeals court should realize that they're losing everything at the Supreme Court, and if they had any sense of judicial restraint and fairness, they would say, Judge Zinnis, you're being an idiot. She expressed deep distrust toward the administration, citing previous violation of court orders. I'm a judge, and I'm one of 733 with a little district in Maryland, but I'm a federal judge appointed. You better listen to me, President Trump and high-level officials. And usually I'd be like, yeah, I mean, come on, let's follow the system. But there's no enforcement mechanism. They don't have police force to enforce it on purpose. And it was never meant to sit there and stymie the president of the United States over and over and over again. With 115 lawsuits in 6 months filed against him with his name on it. I mean, it's crazy. Abrego's lawyers raised concerns about deportation to dangerous countries such as South Sudan. Guess what? Supreme Court already said we can deport there if we want. Pointing to State Department travel warnings that argue deporting him to a third country like Mexico could be a backdoor method to return him to El Salvador. Once he's deported, if El Salvador wants to come and collect up their citizen, they have a right to, just like we have a right to collect up our citizens. I mean, who are we think we are to tell El Salvador they can't have their citizen? He's a citizen of their country, not ours. Oh, but it's asylum. No, it's not asylum. That country's safer than the United States right now. Just because you're going to feel consequences for being in a gang. Administration, of course, alleges that he did human smuggling charges due to 2020-22 traffic stop. The judicial frustration. Judge Zinnes criticized the administration for previously deporting Abrego in violation of court orders and for slow compliance with directives to bring him back. A contempt finding is still on the table. Bring it, Judge. Your contempt finding would be a matter of wasting your breath. Trump can pardon them. It's becoming a flashpoint for how immigration enforcement intersects with due process rights. We already discussed due process is different for each crime, level of crime, person. These are judges just getting involved, trying to slow down the administration because they have lifetime to do their job. The president has 4 years left to get his mandates through. And if you can slow it down with the court system, then you can prevent him from doing what he was elected to do, to the chagrin of the actual democratically elected president who actually got votes. Ridiculous. All right, moving on. Judge, that was from the Post, by the way. So I wanted to get one from here. Bring Kilmer home. Oh, he's just got a baby. And these white old liberals are the problem, too. So a federal judge, this is from a conservative point of view, in Maryland, signaled on Friday she may soon issue a ruling that could delay the Trump administration's order to deport Kilmer. Yeah, even though she knows she's going to lose. And this is where judicial ethics need to come in, and Congress needs to impeach some of these judges, or at least open an investigation. Did you knowingly issue this ruling knowing that it would probably be appealed? And by the way, an injunction says that they have to find that the party that gets the injunctive relief had a higher likelihood of success than the other party. And she knows, and they know they're going to get appealed and overturned, but they're trying to slow it down. They're trying to slow walk it all. So she said she may block the Trump administration's attempt to rapidly deport Maryland Father Garcia. He was previously deported to El Salvador in violation of a court order. We don't know that. He's currently in Tennessee awaiting trial for a federal human smuggling charges, but may be released on bail soon. Department of Justice argues the judge no longer has jurisdiction now that Garcia is back in the U.S. We fulfilled your mandate, Judge. She says, yeah, but you didn't bring him to Maryland. Well, yeah, because he's in another federal equal judicial circuit, a district court, handling business over there. Talk to them. But as soon as he's released, we don't have to bring him back. She disagreed and expressed concern that Homeland Security might deport Garcia again before he can legally challenge it. What challenges left? This guy's have more due process than any other immigrant in America. He's got a final order of deportation. Yes, we won't send him to where the immigration judge said we can't send him, whether it's Guatemala or El Salvador. Okay, we won't. Mexico, Peru. I don't get it. Next legal steps. Another judge is set to review the decision on Garcia's bail release. That's the Tennessee judge. The outcome could affect whether ICE regains custody. So he's basically trying to get out of jail because he wants to go live his free life while this court case goes through the process. But ICE is saying, okay, at a minimum, we're going to detain him in our facility, and he's not getting out. But then another liberal judge will come in under what's called a habeas claim and get him out. But you know what? Instead of going through all that, we're done with this guy. He's already got a final order of deportation. He's out of here. She wants to stop it, though, because she is the president of the United States. Judge Zinnis, president of the United States. If they want to be president so bad, why don't they just quit their job and run for office? Oh, this is on the unaccompanied minors that they found. Let's listen to this for a minute.
It's Gregory Bovino, Border Patrol Chief for the El Centro sector. Now, Chief, it's good to see you tonight. Have there been any arrests in the attacks on your agents? Because when I see this video of them hurling these rocks, and this isn't the first such video we've seen since these protests began, this is criminal activity putting individual agents' lives directly at risk. What can you tell us?
Sure. Laura, it's good to see you, and thank you for having me tonight. As far as the arrests go, we've made dozens of arrests during Operation at Large, which is the operation here in Los Angeles, the immigration operation. We've made dozens of arrests.
Not enough.
And most of those arrests are for assault or impeding federal officers.
Not
That's
enough.
a serious crime, and some of these folks, when they're arrested...
But if we never hear about the arrest because you're not putting it out there, you're not showing these people being perp walked, I guarantee you, after what they did, they had video of that Wisconsin judge who was hiding the immigrant, and she got arrested by the FBI, and they walked her out, I think in a robe, but with her hands behind her back in handcuffs from her own courthouse. That's what they need to do, is start showing these people getting arrested and charged, showing them being taken down. Every single one of them. That way, the news gets out like, whoa, 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 I'm not going to prison for some immigrant I don't know. Because these are professional agitators. They're just anarchists. They talk about party of fascism. They're the fascists.
Are looking at some pretty serious time in prison.
CBP released this image of 9 juveniles who were found at this marijuana facility.
10,
One is
9
as
were
young
unaccompanied.
as 14 years of age.
14.
What do we know about them? Were they working at the facility? Were they hanging out? Do we have any idea who their sponsors were at this facility run by this company called Glass Houses?
Hell no.
Sure, Laura. The juveniles that you see in that picture, several of them are not sponsored. Several came across the border, at least under the research that we found a few years ago, and they disappeared. You talked about the children that disappear. These are those children that have disappeared. The 300,000 children that have disappeared. You're seeing it real time right here. This is what is
I can't lose again this year.
AI that with Copilot.
happening to some of those children. I believe one of the children may have been, at least at this point in the investigation, accompanied, but the rest that you see in that picture were unaccompanied juveniles, including that 14-year-old. What happens to these children? Where do they live? And what conditions are they put under, both at work and then when they're not working? A lot of questions here. This is something that the Border Patrol has seen
14
over the
working on a
past 4
cannabis
years
farm.
when
That makes a lot of
millions
sense.
streamed across that border. Let me say that again. Millions streamed across that border, including children. Some of the things that we saw on the border were truly reprehensible. And now that we're in the interior,
Well, one of my sources
conducting...
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. One of my sources today in the federal government told me, look, remember that the money made at these farms or processing plants, remember, especially involving recent migrants, people who've crossed the border in the last few years,
They're still under
underage
cartel.
or not, a percentage of that money they're making, whatever they're making, is going to pay off their debt to the cartels who made sure that they got over the border. So these illegal pot grows and other agricultural interests are helping fund the cartels that are terrorizing America with drugs and also engaged in rampant human trafficking. So that's a part of this that we haven't
Because
discussed
the
enough
media
on the
doesn't
angle,
discuss.
but we're going to be discussing it a lot in the coming weeks. But this is reprehensible. And this organization, this, quote, business, this illegal pot grow, they're helping the cartels if this indeed is happening.
Yeah,
and
That's exactly right. Every single person that's trafficked across that border, whether it's a child or an adult, pays several $1,000s to come across the border. And that several $1,000s does go to those cartels, as you say.
And why is it not okay for federal law enforcement being docs just doing the job that Congress forced them to do? Not individually, but that's their mandate. Congress, under Bill Clinton, a Democrat, that's where a lot of these immigration laws came out, as a compromise in many cases, but the compromise is never good enough for these emotional liberals. Why can't they wear a mask to prevent their families being destroyed because they're doing the job that we as Americans asked them to do? But all these protesters can wear masks. But you know, the hypocrisy of the left and the Democrat Party should be over after this. Biden got exposed. The wokeness got exposed. They're about to elect a literal communist as the mayor of New York City.
Many are. It's
would be horrified to see that children are working in the fields.
They don't even.
Okay,
they're protesting
brought across the border. Obviously, a purpose to bring
about
them
going back
the
to
border,
Mexico, but yet they
instead,
wave their flag.
This is what she's saying.
We also are going to have a reinstitution of the Angelino card, something that Mayor Garcetti started during COVID, that will actually provide cash assistance to people. Because, you know, you have people who don't want to leave their homes, who are not going.
If I was a LA resident, I'd be pissed. So they're illegal, not supposed to be in the country. They're scared to leave their home because somebody's finally doing something about it, enforcing the laws. Oh, they say, oh, we need immigration reform to fix the borders and to stop these flows and to deport all these people. We need immigration reform. No, we don't. We need a president with a backbone. We need a different president. We didn't need any more. And now they're so scared they can't leave their home because they might get sent back. And this socialist, Democrat, idiot mayor is saying, okay, let's give them free money because they just can't leave home. Basically, we're just going to pay them to hide. They're going to pay them to hide from immigration officers, which is a crime. It's called harboring. You're harboring and preventing ICE from doing their job. It's a felony under Title 8 U.S. Code. She should be arrested for it. They should all be arrested. If they're giving them money knowingly that they're hiding from ICE, that is obstruction.
Going to work, and they are in need of cash.
She is giving out free cash, just cash, to illegals. So if you want to talk about incentivizing illegal activity, stay home, don't go to work, and then the bishop out there, one of them says, don't go to church. So this is a dream for them. And they just get free money.
Yeah. Now you're here illegally and you get free money.
Unbelievable. You know what I see there when Mayor Bass says something like that is she chooses illegal aliens, drug cartels, terrorists, bad people, and bad things over American citizens. Law enforcement agencies are in these communities. People like that won't do anything about this. So guess what, Laura? We're going to.
Yeah, right. I've heard it before. I'm glad that you guys are at least saying it.
They want the cheap labor, just like the cartels want their money. They want their cut.
It's slave labor.
Businesses want to lower wages, keep them as.
And guess what? They always say, well, let's provide them a path to citizenship. You provide them a path to citizenship or even a green card or even a work permit. They're not going to work on those farms. They're going to go find other jobs because the farms are artificially keeping the prices low so that we have cheaper tomatoes. And we might have to just bite the bullet and say, hey, look, they're costing us more in tax revenue. Think about this. The average student in America, not even these cities, but just take all across America, is $13,000, $14,000. Think about how many children of illegal immigrants are in our school systems from K to 12, where a bad decided court called Plyler out of Texas in the 80s said, oh, yeah, they're entitled to free education if they're in this country, even if they're illegal. So now we're on the hook for their K through 12 education at $13,000 per student. I did the math once, and it was like, $113 billion a year, something, $160 billion a year just for their education costs. We have to end this birthright citizenship, too. It's crazy. Sneak in the country.
Low as possible and keep people in this vulnerable situation. These workers are kept in a permanently indentured state. And all these liberals who claim they care about the kids and, oh, the children, we're doing it for the children. I don't see any concern about the children or for the agents who are being descended upon by these jackals and these crowds. Again, these agents.
And by the way, any worker that's paid under the table, not only are they not paying taxes, I mean, they could voluntarily try to with the ITIN. But did you know when you employ somebody, what you don't realize, your employer is actually matching a lot of the Social Security and Medicare taxes and federal taxes, and in most cases, state taxes. They're matching a percent and actually adding to the tax coffer. So these employers are not only not withholding if they're doing it under the table, which most of the time they are, especially with illegal workers, because they don't have a Social Security number, so they can't send tax money in. But they're not only not paying or withholding the workers' taxes, but they're also not paying the matching taxes on that worker. So it's robbing Social Security and Medicare. You talk about going broke. Every employee paid under the table is not paying their own Social Security and Medicare tax or state, local, federal tax, which go for the roads, the police, the fire, the schools. Oh, by the way, the schools that their kids are going to for free, thanks to bad decisions in the Supreme Court. But their employers aren't doing the matching taxes either, further hampering all these social programs that the liberals love so much. Everybody loves, just that we can't afford them. People don't talk about that, or all the identity theft that goes in. So when you maybe really, as a citizen, qualify for SNAP, but when they do a tax return and it shows that you made all over the country $150,000 that year, even though maybe you were on disability even, you have to sit there and prove that that wasn't you that used your own identity. These people are stealing identities. It's a felony.
It's got to come out of those vehicles. I know it's dangerous. They got to come out of these
Get out of
vehicles,
the
and they got to throw down with some of these protesters. You'll see them starting to run, but until these people throwing the rocks go to jail for a long period of time, someone's going to end up killed. That's what I'm worried about. Chief, final word.
Laura, exactly. Something bad is going to happen if this continues.
Duh.
The search is underway for the man.
Thirsty hair? Meet Aussie. It's giving moisture with a capital M. Made for every type and
Seen on video allegedly firing at federal agents during a violent clash at a cannabis
Not just
farm
that, look
near
at all
Los
the people in
Angeles.
between there.
It comes as a
all
federal
the people that
judge
coulda got
overnight
shot.
ordering the Trump administration to temporarily halt, quote, indiscriminate immigration stops in 7 California counties, including Los Angeles. The judge stating that the DHS cannot detain someone based on their race, spoken language, or job, and that they cannot deny a detainee the right to legal counsel. The order comes in response to a lawsuit filed last week by immigration advocacy groups, as the immigration crackdown around parts of Los Angeles has been intensifying, resulting in chaotic scenes like this one. Aerial footage shows scores of masked agents swarming rural sites, some kicking in doors, others
doing their
tossing
job.
smoke canisters to scatter workers. Among those found, 10 minors. Authorities released this photo showing agents posing with the children. In a late-night social media post, President Trump described protesters as thugs, hurling rocks and bricks at law enforcement vehicles, saying he's granting total authorization to protect officers and demanding arrests immediately. In Texas, a chilling new case. The FBI now offering a $25,000 reward for information on this man, accused of plotting a July 4th ambush outside an ICE detention facility.
Former
He's
soldier,
one
by
of
the way.
12 people now charged in the suspected attack. Officials say fireworks were used to lure correction
And
officers.
somebody coordinated all that. Somebody coordinated that attack. You don't get 12 people together with an elaborate plan with bulletproof vests and assault rifles, and they just all got together one day and say, hey, you know what, we're going to lure them out with fireworks, get the agents out there and start, poo-pooing at them. You know what I'm saying? I'm self-censoring because of the algorithms.
Joining us now, Tom.
I'm going to run you through some field sobriety tests.
Oh,
Okay?
this is...
Yeah, I
You know
know.
who this is?
Body
This
cam
is
videos
sad.
released by the City of Fairmont Police Department show Olympic gold medal gymnast Mary Lou Retton.
Remember Mary Lou Retton? If you're in your 40s, you definitely do. She was the first one female to be all over the Wheaties boxes. She was a 1980s icon. Look at her, man. She's on oxygen now. DUI. I don't know what she did to destroy her body, but she was a healthy gymnast. It's so sad.
Joining us now, Tom. I watched that video out of Camarillo, California yesterday and was just mortified. What happened there and what is your reaction?
My reaction is the same as been from day one. That people are welcome to protest. They have their First Amendment rights, but they can't cross that line.
Man, cross the line.
Racists and terrorists. I mean, the rhetoric is so high, and I said 2 months ago, it's going to end up with a loss of life. And we had one the other day in Texas, and it's not over. I mean, the rhetoric has to end. ICE agents are simply enforcing the law that members of Congress enacted.
There it is. This is what I was talking about. You see how this guy, he was coordinated. He'd get his bike in front of there, they'd stop, throw rocks. Then they basically push him out of the way, and then he would do it again to the next vehicle. And so finally, the final vehicle was like, screw it, and ran over his bike. Look at that. That is so dangerous and sick. And this guy.
Governor Gavin Newsom put up yesterday kids running from tear gas, crying on the phone because their mother was just taken from the fields. Trump calls me new scum, but he's the real scum. Ooh. We later find out there were 10 juveniles in that operation.
9 unaccompanied.
8 of which were unaccompanied minors.
9.
What do you
time? The rhetoric's at an all-time high. Every day I get up and I read the media. First of all, I don't believe it. If the polls turn it off, because all the fake news out there, they're lying.
They need to have specific police vehicles out there that deal with nothing but these protesters that get in the way or cause violence, and start arresting them on the spot. Put them in a paddy wagon. And you want to keep going? Get more paddy wagons out. But they can't put up with this nonsense anymore. All it's doing is emboldening them, especially in California. See, they're not doing that in Florida. And even though they had those planned attacks in Texas, which I think is crazy because Texas does not play around like Florida. But then it's because these judges like this.
Operations, she says, I think it's important for the court not to burden otherwise lawful law enforcement activities. Your reaction there?
Look, people need to understand, ICE officers and Border Patrol, they don't need probable cause to walk up to somebody, briefly detain them, and question them. They just need the totality of the circumstances, right? They just got through the observation, get articulable facts based on their location, their occupation, their physical appearance, their actions. Like a uniformed Border Patrol agent walks up to them at for instance, a Home Depot. And they got all these articulable facts, plus the person walks away or runs away. Agents are trained. What they need to...
and why is this judge treating them like any different than any other law enforcement agency? Like I gave the example. If you're a cop on the beat in an Asian part of town, say Chinatown, and there's been a rash of burglaries by white Eastern European accented persons, and at 3 a.m, the cop realizes, wait, that's a group of white males. Why are they out at 3 a.m. in this part of town? They have every constitutional right to be there, but he has a right and good police work to go up and at least say, hey, guys, how you doing? Try to have a consensual conversation. And let's say during that, he notices somebody's got a burglary tool hanging out of their pocket. Now he can detain them and investigate further. And if there's probable cause, he can arrest them and charge them. And then they go to court, and the final part of due process is called beyond a reasonable doubt. The state has to prove beyond doubt, a reasonable doubt, that they were in fact the ones that committed those crimes. It's so stupid.
Christian's mother, Aaliyah.
Okay, Noah's going to make a fire. Our job is to let him do it.
All right. Trump rages. We already went over that one. Let's keep going because we're kind of running out of time. I think in about 10 minutes we're going to stop this live feed. Applause as Terry, these poor workers. I do feel bad for them, but the deep state is real. And there's 1,300 that were getting laid off over there in
1,300 people are being laid off today as part of mass firings. The move follows the Supreme Court ruling that that opened the door, to mass federal firings.
It's sad, but the problem is there's so much duplicate. When I was in government, just with the DOD, and I had civilian workers that worked for me and stuff, there's just so much laziness and duplication. Yeah, you have some very hard worker civil servants that really take their job serious, but there's a lot of them that are protected and lazy, and it takes forever to fire them. 2-3 years to fire somebody for anything. They would never make it in the civilian world, but they live after their probation period done. They have to go through this merit protection system that was designed in the 70s by, maybe even earlier, but I think it was codified by Carter or somebody in the 70s or 80s, and it's a onerous system where that protects the lazy. There's a lot of duplication. Elon Musk and those, not even Elon Musk, another CEO went in there and volunteered and said, hey, we have more CIOs, which should be one person per agency, a CIO, Chief Information Officer. They do so much duplication that one laptop from a low-level employee to be provisioned for use, put the Microsoft Word on there, some of the security features, they take like 6 people to do that. And days. Like they can get it done by one person with automation, 6 of them per day with one employee. Like it's just crazy. And so it sucks, but yeah, these people are starting to lose their job, but the money train is over. It's expensive to employ people. So I do feel bad. I don't feel bad for the lazy ones, but I feel bad. There's some hard workers in the federal government. I've met a lot of them. I have friends that work in the federal government that are great, but there's a lot of them that brag, oh, I get to telework on Friday, which really meant just a 3-day weekend for them because, yeah, they might check their computer every once in a while, but they're not really working. They're out golfing, doing housework. It's rife with abuse. It's an old school system of employment that just doesn't work. This is crazy. I'm glad that they went over this, and I'm going to go through just the main points of this article, how the media downplayed then memory hold Trump's near assassination. Had that happened to a Democrat, we would still be hearing about it. It would have made huge news, but they were scared that it was helping, and it did. That it was helping the president get reelected, or the former president get reelected, who is now our president. And then somebody else tried to do it, which was dumb because all it did, I think either somebody in the deep state was trying to take him out or Iran was paying people to take him out. Because there's no way. It's so rare, these attempts on a president's life, and he had 2 of them. No way. So, bottom line, a year ago, almost to the day, Trump survived an attempt at a campaign rally in Butler. We all know about that. The Pew Pew man grazed Trump's ear and unalived a local firefighter. Rest in peace, Corey Comparatori, I think his name was, and the family, and injured 2 others. But despite its severity, the media's coverage was brief and critics argue intentionally muted. And it was. It was big for about a day or 2, but man, that media cycle went quick. Commentators like Mark Halperin and Drew Holden claim mainstream media outlets intentionally downplayed the event. That's why mainstream media is going dead. And that's why you need to like and share my videos, because we are the new media. But they're so used to being able to play kingmaker or queenmaker with Hillary Clinton, they try to, that they're just biased. It's just biased. If they were fair, they wouldn't go out of business. So they intentionally downplayed the event using vague language like loud noises, even after it was clear Trump had been pew-pewed at. Holden noted media coverage quickly faded and was overshadowed by other political stories like Biden stepping down. Halperin accused media institutions of treating Trump differently than Democratic figures like Obama or Biden would have been treated in a similar situation. Oh my God, especially Obama. The subdued media response is seen as evidence of deep-seated biases and reluctance to amplify Trump's narrative. Holden and Halperin say commentators shifted the focus. So to do a little deeper dive, it says, how has it affected political reporting historically? Well, I mean, partisan press started really in the 19th century. Newspapers are openly affiliated with political parties. That's why you have like the something Democrat or the Republican Gazette or something like that. Let me go back on this one. I'm using Copilot to summarize these pages, which is like the Microsoft ChatGPT. How would Democrats have been or had been treated differently? So the article strongly suggests that Democratic leaders would have received far more sympathetic coverage and sustained coverage had they been the target of the pew-pew attempt compared to Donald Trump's near deadly shooting was handled. It was all about the duration. Like January 6th was not near as serious as a candidate or a former president almost being taken off the planet. But yeah, it got way more coverage. Same with the Russian hoax and all that. So anybody who doesn't think the media is biased and these people are idiots. We were running out of time. I was going to get into this Planned Parenthood. They're mad because, and then this judge says, no, you have to fund them. Now, this wasn't an executive order. This was part of the big, beautiful bill. So this was actually voted on by Congress and signed by the President of the United States. And this judge says, hey, heck no, you can't take money away from Planned Parenthood. You have to give it back. I'm the judge. Nobody can outdo me. I'm a low-level district court judge who has power. That's why they need to rein in these judges. So this judge here is Judge Indira Talwani. So let's see who appointed her. So she says the provision is part of the Reconciliation Act, voted on by Congress and signed by the President, and targets organizations that provide abortions and received over 800,000 Medicaid reimbursements in 2023. Her legal basis found that the law may be unconstitutional and could cause irreparable harm to Medicaid patients by disrupting healthcare services. You know, they always say, oh, they don't just do that. You know, these people are using Medicaid for cervical screenings and all that. Yeah, they might be, but, and I don't even take a position on abortion, especially in the first few weeks. Care less. I know as a Christian, but we're not a Christian country. It's separation of church and state. It's all about what is right and wrong. Okay. If it's a clump of cells, to me, it's not that big a deal. Now, I know people are Catholic and they disagree. But guess what shouldn't happen? In a divisive issue like that, and the federal law, including this law, says, hey, we're not using taxpayer money to fund it directly or indirectly. So we've always had the law that federal money cannot fund any abortion. That's why when they tried to do it outside of certain circumstances, like life of a mother to military members, they're like, no, we can't pay for it. Federal funds are barred. But what Planned Parenthood does is says, okay, well, we won't use those funds for that. So we'll free up these funds to do that. So it's a backdoor way of funding abortion with your taxpayer dollars. And whether you agree or disagree with abortion, our tax dollars shouldn't go to it. So this judge, Indira, whatever her name is, I'd like to see who appointed her. Let me ask Copilot real quick. Who appointed this judge? And Copilot says Barack Obama did it. Obama Biden appointees, man. Forget the law. We want to create law or stop laws that we disagree with because we're a low-level district judge. Absolutely ridiculous. They need to put a stop to this. I wanted to show you this when I run out of time. Don't ever believe polls unless you go to Rasmussen. Rasmussen was the most accurate. There's a couple pollsters, but this is YouGov, and they're always wrong. Even if the news is good for Trump, which it rarely will ever be for a Republican, on these polls, their sample sizes are bad. Half the country agrees, half the country disagrees with Alligator Alcatraz. Then last night they had an all-girl boxing thing. I was going to get into that. We're running out of time. This is one I might do a video on later. I believe in hyperbaric chambers, and there's so many benefits to it that they're finding to heal tissue and stuff, especially like if you've had cancer and stuff. But this doctor, just like I remember, it was not even a year ago, a kid got burnt to death in those because they can flash, and it's rare, but you're stuck inside this chamber and it goes, you're dead. So he basically cooked himself, this doctor. He's a physical therapist with a doctorate degree. He got burned alive. Basically cooked himself. Rest in peace. I believe in it. You're at least, hopefully we get safer doing it. I was going to go over AI-proof jobs, but we'll go over that another time. And Charleston, South Carolina is no longer the top destination for tourists, according to this magazine site. Oh, this is that judge again for the immigration. Oh, let's watch this. Military veteran arrested for posing as cop and bounty hunter. Why don't they just go be a cop? There's a shortage. Why do these people do
status
this?
Of trade and imports. This could give us some insight into the revenues beking collected.
Oh, that's Treasury Post. Oh,
the Treasury just released its monthly budget statement.
This is that Treasury $27 billion budget surplus in June. I haven't seen a budget surplus forever.
Sonoma County Sheriff's Department says this is some of the fake gear 40-year-old Greg Jackson used to pose as a police officer across multiple states. Jackson was reportedly using a vehicle outfitted with red and blue emergency lights, similar to those on legit police cars. Investigators say he was identifying himself as a bounty hunter.
That, in most states, a lot of states, you can do that. Fugitive recovery agent, if you have a valid bail on them, you basically own that person. You can go anywhere and get them. But and I don't know how. I think this is Florida. No, California. Yeah, California. You're done. You're done. You don't get
Sheriff's
any rights.
Department tells ABC 7 News Jackson from Santa
How dare you
Rosa
go after criminals?
was out on felony
Hug those
pre-trial
thugs.
release on concealed weapons charges.
So he already had concealed weapons, which he probably wouldn't have had in a conservative state. But he probably got caught with a weapon as a bail bondsman and didn't have the correct permits and all the regulatory crap. And so, unlike West Virginia, where I just moved from, South Carolina, Georgia, where it's constitutional, you don't even need a permit to carry a gun, and it's safer. We don't have all this thug problems.
Adding, during a search of his home and vehicle, they found several items that falsely identified him as a police officer. During the investigation, it was determined that he was not licensed to operate as a fugitive recovery agent.
So when I heard that all the
FAFO, man. FAFO. Oh, man, oh, man, oh, man. FAFO. Well, folks, it's been real. Hope you enjoyed this 2-hour edition of Tater Thoughts. Enjoy the rest of your Saturday. Hopefully this will take off as we do this more and more. Until football season, probably start usually around noon. Before then, we might start in the morning and actually talk a little bit of football as well. So, I mean, that'd be a lot of fun. Why not? We should just do it, right? Right? It's been fun.
You're watching Tater Thoughts, the no BS take on current events.